Welcome to State of Tech, Synchron's innovation podcast. Synchron is a leading global digital transformation consulting firm focused on financial services and big technology organizations. Our State of Tech podcast hosts subject matter experts and business leaders as they explore emerging technologies, industry insights, innovation trends, and more. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Synchron State of Tech podcast. I'll be your host, Vitor de Oliveira, and today we are diving into a crucial and timely topic, silencing hate, how AI helps shape safer space online. As we celebrate Pride Month, it's important to acknowledge the significant impact of online spaces on diverse and underrepresented groups such as the LGBTQ+ community and the vital role technology plays in protecting this space from hate and harassment. Ryan Cox, Global Co-Head of EI at Synchron, will give us his insights on EI's role in reducing online hate speech, balancing free speech, and the future of EI content moderation. Welcome, Ryan, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Vitor. It's great to be here.
My first question is around addressing bias in AI algorithms. One of the biggest concerns with using AI for content moderation is the potential for bias in the algorithms. How do you address this bias to ensure fair and accurate moderation of online content?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vitor, and it's a really important one. Biases are when some of your training data is maybe not diverse enough. So one of the key pieces is that you need to understand what that data is that was used to train your model. And you have to also take a look and see, is it skewed toward maybe a certain demographic, ideology? That's where bias comes from. If your data is not trained on a nice, even data set that has a fair representation from all sides and all angles. That's probably number one and one of the biggest things that we can do. But of course, it doesn't just stop there. It doesn't just stop at what happens at training time for a lot of these AI models. But you also have to think through and look at continuously and proactively monitoring and really testing to identify and correct any emerging biases. Over time, biases can emerge in systems, or when you upgrade your models, you might encounter some additional bias that creeps in. So you really have to stay on top of that as you're building and working with these models. Prioritizing transparency is also key, getting user feedback, ensuring that users have the chance to opt out. Those are all really important ways to help address potential biases. And then last but not least, things like human moderators is also important. AI is not a silver bullet yet, and introducing that human in the loop is also an important step in reducing and mitigating biases in those AI algorithms.
Thank you very much for your insights. Moving to the next question. Given the complexities of online communications, do you believe it's practically feasible to deploy AI effectively to curb hate speech?
Deploying any technology certainly presents opportunities and challenges. One of the big challenges is hate speech is dynamic. It can be coded, it can be sarcastic, people can use images, and it can also have cultural nuances. So there's a lot of challenge in even detecting what hate speech is. Different countries, different worldviews have different definitions of it. Also, a lot of the big models that tend to be used at the moment, at least in AI, are focused on major speaking languages. So some of the maybe less popular languages, dialects, are not going to be as well covered. So you can imagine if you're trying to effectively curb hate speech in a small dialect in Southern China, that might be a little bit more difficult than if you're curbing hate speech in the US or in the UK, where English is a predominant language that's spoken and also that the models are trained on. And then one of the other big complexities that we have to consider is we don't really want to be in a position of censorship. There is a very fine line between having your hate speech removed and actually censoring information or protecting speech of individuals. So it's a fine line, and that makes it hard for a human, and even more so for an AI, to understand the difference and determine where that line is. So coming back to your question, do I think it's feasible? Yeah, I do think it's actually feasible. As I mentioned, keep a human in the loop. So there's a human hybrid model that looks at having humans augment. So you effectively help the humans scale and be better at what they do. AI is great at continuous learning and adaptation. So I mentioned hate speech is dynamic. Well, the good news is so is AI training and feedback and things that we're doing in that space. And then finally, one of the most wonderful things about human society is collaboration and community engagement. The fact that we can work together, and we already see that prior to AI and a lot of these social media and user forums, communities come together. They watch out for it. They check in and really make sure that the community itself is a safe place for people to, be involved in. So I think we're certainly on the right track. You at least have a promising path forward that should bridge the gap over the next couple of years.
That's a great point. And just building on that, one of the major challenges in this field is balancing the detection of hate speech with protecting free speech. In your opinion, what is the major challenge in managing these two?
It is a big challenge. I think fundamentally what we're talking about here is the need to differentiate between harmful content and protected speech. There's no universally agreed upon definition of what constitutes hate speech. So there's inconsistencies in how you would enforce that. And that enforcement, whether it's by human or by an AI or by some sort of combination, is a challenge because globally there is no definition. And then you add on to the point where there are evolving hate speech tactics. You can use coded language, you can use satire, and all these sort of things circumvent detection mechanisms that we have today. So it's definitely a hard area to balance.
Yeah, balancing those concerns certainly must be very challenging. Looking ahead, what advancement in AI technology do you anticipate will improve efforts to reduce online hate speech?
I think we'll see, like anything else, deep learning and machine learning improvements. We'll see that as it's applied to the data. We'll see that as it's applied to how AI models are built and created and used to reduce hate speech. I also touched upon that community-centered aspect, continue to advance and build AI applications that are community-centered, which would actually be kind of a neat idea, right? Because right now, a lot of AI applications are for individuals or kind of work on very specific pieces. But if we can build something that's at the heart of a community to address this problem and work collaboratively across people on problems such as this, I think that could be a really interesting space and would be a great advancement. We also have overall scalability and efficiency gains that we're going to continue to get in the AI space. That's going to be critical, right? Because as the volume of that content grows, the need to scale will be even more important. And then lastly, I was doing a little bit of research in terms of what are some of the universities doing and how are they approaching it. And one of the ways and approaches that they're doing is they're using what's called multimodal discussion transformers, which is really a fancy way of saying AI would have the ability to process different types of data, text, images, audio. And then the discussion transformers bit really is saying that the model's use in this interactive conversational context, and then the model can understand and respond dynamically to that. So it's a slightly different approach at what we're doing. And it was actually a pretty cool piece where it looks like they've been applying it and detecting, I think, up to 88% accuracy when they've been looking across social media platforms. And then under the hood, what it's doing is it's trying to understand those relationships between text and images and comments to reduce false positives. So I think to me, that kind of ties it all up because then you're starting to talk about, well, if I'm reducing false positives, that means that I'm able to protect free speech, but I can get rid of the hate speech. And it also means because I'm looking at text, images, and comments all together, then some of those ways that people are using to circumvent the models becomes more challenging for those who are using the system because the model is getting smarter at looking at all of these things collectively. So looking ahead, I think we'll be able to use these advancements in technologies to reduce online hate speech.
That must be very challenging. Is there anything governments are doing to support tackling this challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a lot of involvement from governments internationally. The UN General Assembly established the International Day for Countering Hate Speech. So that's going to come up on June 18th. And we've seen a number of examples where countries such as Germany and Canada are looking at building laws that in Germany's case, with fines up to 50 million against social media companies that fail to remove or block hate speech within 24 hours. So that's going to be a really important piece to watch over the coming months and how that affects online hate speech. Canada as well are proposed a bill that requires companies that are responsible for general purpose AI systems, so think OpenAI, for example, making sure that those companies that are responsible for them assess risks, test, and monitor their systems to ensure that they're working as intended. And then, of course, put appropriate mitigation measures in place. So I think governments are taking an active view from working with citizens to working with companies that are building these tools to really ensure that their online communities are safe.
Thank you for sharing these insights with us today. It's clear that while AI holds great promise for making online space safer, there are still many challenges and complexities to navigate. As we continue to celebrate Pride Month, let's remember the importance of these efforts in protecting and uplifting marginalized communities online. Thank you, our guests, for joining us, and thank you, listeners, for tuning into this episode of State of Tech.
Thanks for listening to the Synchron State of Tech podcast. Don't forget to like and share this episode, and subscribe to stay up to date on all of the latest and innovative technologies savvy businesses need to know about. To learn more about Synchron, head to our website at www.synchron.com. Stay tuned.